episode 186, IRONMAN Louisville with Andy Greenwood. Welcome to the pursuit of the perfect race. I'm Coach Terry Wilson, and with each episode, I bring stories of athletes to you that share their experiences at races in order for you to learn how to have your perfect race. We will hear stories from athletes of all ages, abilities, and races of all distances. So regardless of where you fit in, there's something in there for you. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Now let the pursuit begin. Hi everybody, welcome back to the pursuit of the perfect race. Today I'm talking with Andy Greenwood about his recent race at IRONMAN Louisville that took place on October 14th, 2018, where the temperature on race day was 48 to 61 and raining throughout the entire day, it seemed like. I was there volunteering, and I can tell you without a shadow of doubt, it was cold. I can't imagine what it was like to ride on that bike. The swim was shortened from 2.4 miles down to 0.9 miles on race day, and it was also a delayed start time as well. Welcome to the show, Andy. I look forward to hearing about your race and spending some time with you today.
Thanks, Terry. Good to be here.
Awesome. So what made you want to do Louisville in the first place, man?
I'd say my adventures in triathlons began 8 years ago when I was living in Miami at the time and had some friends that were doing them. Started out like a lot of people doing sprints and then moved on to Olympics and attempted in a couple that first year or two doing a half. And, doing a full distance was always my goal to try it at least once. IRONMAN Louisville was that attempt.
Nice. So you actually used a plan that I made and have on Training Peaks that is kind of rare that actually people use it, but you actually got that plan and used it for this full Ironman. How did this plan work for you, and walk me through what the plan was like to use for you?
Sure. So yeah, like I said, I found the plan, or I found you, I guess, and then, knew that if I was going to do a full, I couldn't just go out there and say, oh, well, what do I feel like doing today? And then get, doing that exercise or that discipline. So having that structure was a great, resource for me, especially as a beginner, not necessarily knowing what my weaknesses and strengths are, or what was good to be doing when, especially with the swimming. I love swimming, but I can always get better at it. And the plan, started with that kind of focus, and the time built up, so it was easier to carve up my day, knowing that I have, this workout at this time, or I'm doing a brick on Thursday with a swim on Friday, and could plan my family and work schedules around it. So it definitely made things a lot easier for that aspect. And then as time went on, I enjoyed seeing, being able to compare similar workouts that, you've had built in there. So, I had a test for my swim. And I think that particular time for that 400 was when I started around 2:15 and then got down to 2 minutes or even below 2 minutes for, right towards the end. So I could definitely tell I was getting faster. Even though, despite best intentions, work sometimes got in the way of being able to train. So, didn't get all the workouts in, but got the vast majority. I think I remember looking at my Training Peaks history that I had averaged an hour, 15 hour and a half of activity a day for the last, 90 days or so leading up to the race. So it definitely gave me some confidence to be able to do the race.
Awesome. So as far as the plan goes, I do a little something different on my plans, and that's putting a little bit of just a little paragraph on some of the notes there so that we can see what did you think about this, and did that help you understand what the plan focus was for that week and guiding you through it? What was this like?
So, yeah, I first noticed on Mondays there'd be just a blurb about the week and what we were focusing on and advice. It was definitely good to see and good to read. And then I liked having the first time I had a pacing test, said, hey, if you're not swimming consistently at this speed, you might need to seek out extra help, go see a master's coach or get a private swimming lesson or check your cadence. Maybe you need a fit for your bike. Things that as a beginner to that distance, I might not have thought of or realized was an issue.
Awesome. And then as you got closer to the race, there was also a packing list on there. Did you use that?
I did. So my technique for all the other races I've done is to just Google, triathlon checklist and check off a bunch of stuff. So that looking at that list, helped me I didn't, get my stuff together then because I think it was like a month out and I'm a procrastinator. So I waited a little closer to the race day to actually pack. But I did okay, I've got, I looked at that list and said, yes, I have these things. Ooh, no, I don't have any anti-fog. I need to get that. Or, maybe I don't have enough, glide, to get the wetsuit on or whatever. So that was good to kind of be able to look at that or put it in my radar. And then also you had, something about getting your bike looked at, which was perfect. And they definitely tuned it up and made sure that everything was working well. And I think it was definitely crucial to being successful on those terrible conditions, like having a bike that was working perfectly.
Well, good. So as far as your training going into this race, what workouts did you do in the plan that gave you the confidence to go into this race prepared?
Yes, the distance was shortened, but I was most worried about the swim leading up to it. And there was a couple of swim-centric workouts where there's the swim-centric workouts where I swam over 2.5 miles total distance. And that being able to just know that I can grind out, 2.5, 3 miles and feel good was definitely a confidence booster. And the other thing that I had noticed in my past training I think I've done 4 70.3 distance events, and I worried more about the brick aspect, and there was a lot of brick workouts. So getting off the bike and going running, especially in the summer in DC where I live now, it was beautiful. Like I'd plan a route on my bike, however long I needed to go, and then I'd come home, put my bike in the garage, and then go running. It was very, very rewarding. Or I'd go to a park that had loops, and I just, throw my bike in the car, lock it up, and then go for a run around that same loop. So those were definitely good confidence builders.
Nice. So as far as your training goes, not really worrying about focusing on the plan so much, but what was the most hours of training that you used or you performed in 1 week?
I think I hit 16, 17 hours in August, leading up to the race. I remember doing one of the reasons it was so long is it was a swim-centric workout with a long bike ride in brick, like a 5-6 hour bike ride, and then an hour-long run after it. And it was a beautiful hot summer day, and I went for a long bike ride. Started out early in the morning, got home around 1 o'clock, and then just went for, I think it was just an easy, 50-minute jog. So ran around my neighborhood, and that was the longest day and longest week.
Okay. And that was back in August.
It was towards the end of August, yeah. So early September, I had a work thing pop up where I was traveling for 10 days in a row. I got 2 workouts in, and I was happy that I was able to do that because it was 12, 14-hour days. Wow. So, yeah.
So mentally, though, were there any days where you just didn't want to train?
Yes. Oh, yeah. And, and I look back at those weeks in Training Peaks where, the ones you missed are red, right? So I definitely had some questions in my mind, especially after the 10 days of not getting – it was like the last build-up week before tapering really began for Ironman Louisville is what I missed. And I was like, I'm not ready. I missed – look at all these red workouts. Like I've missed it all. And talking with my buddy who I was racing with, he was like, look, don't sweat it. Like you put in a lot of work. Like look at how much you have done, not what you haven't. But there are definitely days where, for whatever reason, whether it was work was getting to be too busy or if I needed to be home for family things or whatever. I've got 3 small children, so being home is important and takes up a lot of my time sometimes. And there are days I was like, you know what? Not going for a run. Not going to the pool today. I'm gonna go watch soccer practice or whatever it is.
Right. So with this, it seems like you need to give yourself a little bit of grace from time to time because the training load was taking a little bit too much of the time away from your family.
Right. Yeah. And like, for that 10-day period in September, like I was in North Carolina, doing hurricane response stuff. Like I could not get away to do anything else. So, that was, I made up for it. So like the 2 weeks out, I think I was like 2.5 weeks out when I got done with that. And, I just, the plan said 2-hour bike ride. Well, I did a 4-hour bike ride and I was like, all right, I'm better, like I'm putting in more time in. And then it's got all those metrics it tracks, and my perceived training load or whatever was going back up to where it was before I did the half in August. I did Ironman and Steelhead 70.3 in mid-August as like just a warm up for Louisville.
Nice.
So yeah.
So whenever you actually think of your life work balance with managing 16 to 17 hours of training on the upper end and constantly having like this part-time job on top of being in the Coast Guard, spending time with your 3 children, and I'm assuming a wife too, right?
Yep.
So how did you balance all this together?
She was my support network. I have to give her credit. She took care of the kids on the weekend when I would, we'd get done with whatever activity they were doing. And then, would let me, run off to the pool and then, after, there was a lot of late nights where, we put the kids to bed at 7 and I hadn't had a chance all day to do whatever it was I was supposed to do. And if it was go for a run, I was in luck because I could still do that at night. I'm not necessarily going to get out there on a bike or go swimming, but, she was definitely instrumental in getting that, getting everything balanced.
Wow. So she was pretty critical in your success in this race then.
Yeah. I don't think, she knows how much she did, it was helpful for me to be able to concentrate on this, and she knew it was important to me to be able to get ready for it. And, we didn't always, my need to go for a bike ride wasn't always, well received depending on what was going on, but she was always very, like, she understood. She would say, need you here for these things. And I understood, and I tried not to put her in a situation where she was overwhelmed either.
Or the other.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So whenever you actually think about what she was actually doing for you during all this training, was she helping with the laundry, the meals? I mean, she had to balance the kids and school's activities on the days that you just come home and start training, right?
Exactly. And I started in May-ish. I forget. It was like beginning of May or late April. So kids are still in school all the way through June. And there's, she was working full time at the time. And then like her contract ended. And those early stages, thankfully it wasn't too much of a burden then. Like, you're in the 10 to 12 hour range, right? So, but once school let out, like it was really a challenge. The month of July, I think, was the hardest. August was easier for us as a family, because, there was some family vacations we took. We had some work trips where, if I am out of town, I can't help anyway. So I just would bring my bike with me or whatever. And then so really for the month of August, she was back home in North Carolina for like 2 weeks, and then we had a week vacation together where we had more family and things, and then I went back to work and she stayed in North Carolina. So that was when there was really a lot of time for working out. So I at least didn't have the family stuff then, but it worked out well for everybody, the way it worked out.
Well, good. So how did she actually know what to take off of your plate? Did you have like communication with her saying, hey, I'm going to be doing this Ironman and I need you to basically assume these responsibilities? Or did she just kind of wing this? What was this communication like between you and her?
Winging it, I think, is the best way to put it. She was already, Coach D, I lovingly refer to her as the domestic commander. So she already had control of the house and what was going on. And I would, instead of leaving my water bottles from the bike ride in the sink, I would wash them. I don't want to add to her burden, but she would make sure my bike kit and track shorts and running gear was always clean, as long as I put it where it belonged. So if I left it out in the garage with the bicycle, that's not going to get done. But if I brought it in and put it in the hamper, it was fine.
Sounds like you need more water bottles.
I do. Exactly. You never have too much bike gear, or bicycles for that matter.
So kind of transitioning a little bit here. When did you actually start figuring out the logistics for the race as far as where you're staying, when you're leaving, how you're getting your bike there, all this fun stuff?
Well, so I said I did this race with my one of my best friends from high school, Thomas. He and I basically were choosing between. We narrowed it down as we were talking about this conceptually around this time last year, late October, early November. Like, where are we going to do this? And I had been to Louisville for fun. I knew it was a beautiful city. I don't remember the gentleman's name, but met another triathlete who's from there who talked about it highly. So we were deciding between Louisville and Maryland. Maryland was close for both of us. Flat course, a lot of, really well reviewed. And then it came down to wanting to do the swim in the river because he was more concerned about the swim than I was, and liked the idea of having, that current taking you downstream. Little to know how much it would be for when the day came. But, that was once we picked the place, driving versus flying, I made a reservation at the Seelbach knowing it was right next to the finish line and having stayed there for fun. On a previous trip for fun. So that was a no-brainer for that part. And then, he was going to drive, and I had just gotten a new car, and I was like, I didn't know at the time if I was going to have my new car by then. And then I ended up getting it in June. So I was like, I guess I'm taking the Tesla. This is going to be great. So made it a little bit longer, having to stop in West Virginia mountains to charge. But it was still a really great trip.
Wow. So after you actually figured out the logistics of this, did you want to bring the wife and kids for this, or was this something that you want to do on your own?
No. So our kids are 8, 6, and 4. They're all boys, and long car trips and this type of event. We made the decision pretty early on that about halfway through the year that they weren't going to come. So Thomas and I were there solo.
Okay. Now, whenever you actually started getting into the last 2 weeks of the race, did you start looking at the weather much?
Yeah. Oh yeah. So there's a great, very active Facebook group, for IRONMAN Louisville 2018 that there's all sorts of prognostication and speculation, related to the weather. I didn't sweat it too much. I basically had a cold weather plan, and a nice weather plan. And it wasn't too different. It was just how many layers I had on.
Right. So what was your plan for the cold weather and hot weather?
Hot weather, I was going to not wear my vest and sleeves, and fingerless gloves. So, my plan, one of the things I wanted to make sure I did is have a fresh pair of clothes, and having a changing tent, I wasn't competing for time. Like, I wanted to finish. I wanted to hopefully finish under 15 hours. I wanted to, 15 to 16 would have been great. And then, so those were my, initial goals, like just finish. Like, this is my first time. I want to enjoy it. I don't want to stress about it too much. So the idea of having a bike kit on was appealing to me. So I was like, if I'm going to have a bike kit on to do the bike and change out of my tri-suit or swimsuit or whatever I'm wearing, I need to change back into something. So, that was always the goal, for cold weather, which I ended up needing. I had sleeves and a, waterproof vest, combo thing that I wore, and, had fingered gloves. The only thing I wish I had done that I didn't do is I had booties that I left at home. I could have put over my tri-shoes because my toes were very cold by the end of the day.
Wow. So whenever you actually think about getting to the race venue, when did you actually get to Louisville?
We got there Friday around lunchtime, right at lunchtime.
Okay. And then did y'all go straight down to the expo?
Yep. Yeah. We did packet pickup and, bought some swag and listened to the 2:00 and 3:00 briefs, if I remember correctly at the time. And one was the athlete brief, and then there was a first timer brief right after that.
Okay. So
then we walked down.
That you wanted to learn there about that?
Yeah, definitely. Talking about, and we also walked down to the swim finish. So we could see that at that time. But during the briefs, I remember, them talking about just how you're doing a full, you need to pay attention more to cars because it's a longer course. There's going to be more traffic, which is totally true. I hadn't really thought too much about. And then I don't remember any other specific advice that I got, but it was definitely, I definitely walked away from it feeling like I was better prepared.
Good. So whenever you actually got to the Ironman Village, being this was your first time here, what was your impression of the Ironman Village here?
It was positive. I mean, it was I'd just done Steelhead that was set up on a beach, in August, and so very similar, this is your condition, cordoned off area that you can be in for the village and kind of set up where they had to put it. So that part was fine. I thought the location was really, really nice right there on the river, the big field there. And had lots of space and everything was like Ironman does. It was really well run.
Nice. So as far as all the swag you bought, what'd you buy?
So day one. Oh yeah, right. So I did buy the bike kit because I knew there was something that I wanted to have, and ironically funnily enough, is what I wore today to bike to work. So I bought the Ironman Louisville bike shorts and jersey, and then the name shirt in gray, and got it in gray. And that was it for day one, and then ended up buying after the race the finisher's jacket and a hat as well.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So as far as your nutrition, the days leading up to the race, what did you want to get from a nutrition standpoint? Did you have a certain meals that you wanted to get in, or did you care about the meals? What was this like?
I did. I mean, I paid attention to what I was eating, and, trying to stay from processed sugars and just, junk food and crap. When I stopped so having a Tesla, I ended up having to stop at Sheetz. So Sheetz has fresh baked or fresh made food that you can order. And so I had a salad there and some chips and popcorn. I tried to hydrate. That was really important. I didn't know what, exactly what the weather was going to be like, but it seemed like it was going to be colder. In my previous, Ironmans being either in Florida or Southern California, all my previous triathlons being in those areas, I was like, oh man, I don't know what to do with cold weather. This is going to be great. So I knew that, salt was going to be the most important thing. So, Friday, we did stop at, Buffalo Trace, and did a tasting there on our way, across. But otherwise, we were, where did we get there? Thursday? No, it was Friday. Yeah. And then, Friday night we just had a burger. So I wanted a burger, and then, didn't really do too much else for nutrition wise, as far as focus. I'd heard a funny story from, a good friend at a local bike shop here about, he was doing, support for a pro, and I couldn't tell you the guy's name, but it was in Louisville. And he was telling about the race conditions. It was in February. They were doing a crit, and, the conditions were terrible. On day one, they had a lot of rain, and then it froze overnight. It went from 70 to 30 degrees, and everything froze. And as people were coming around curves, their bikes were cracking, and this pro had, basically was in the tent warming up, on his kit and eating a barbecue sandwich. He was one of the few, that finished because he had an aluminum bike or steel bike, whereas all the other guys had carbon fiber bikes. So they all broke because of the cold weather. It's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah. So I don't know. I kind of had that story in the back of my mind. I was like, yeah, I'm not going to stress too much about eating, salads and carb loading or whatever. Maybe I could have been a little bit faster, probably. But again, this is my first time. I didn't want to over stress.
Gotcha. So as far as the day before the race, you go down, you check in your bike, all this fun stuff, put your bags where they're supposed to be. What was your emotions and anxiety here? Because you can kind of get a feel for what the weather is really going to be the next day. And if I remember right, it was probably sprinkling the day before, if I remember right.
Yeah, it did rain. It did rain. It was raining harder, I think, on Saturday than it did on Sunday. And they were, we were looking at Weather Underground or Dark Sky apps on my phone, like which have like hourly breakdowns, and and it was all over the map. It was like, oh, well, it's going to rain at 1:00. It's like, oh, we'll be on the bike by then. It'll be fine. We'll get a little wet. That's okay. And then, oh wait, it's going to rain in the morning, but it'll clear out and be, nice in the 60s, upper 60s at some point. And on some of those forecasts, it's like, that'll be great. So, when we went to drop off our bike, hadn't rained yet. But got that there and then dropped off we'd packed our bags that morning, basically, two guys in a hotel room. We had 2 beds or whatever. And he took over one side and just put all his stuff everywhere. And I took one half of the room, put all my stuff everywhere. So we kind of got everything together on Friday night or Saturday morning before we went over there. And then, we're both kind of worried about the bike course at that point. We figured out that, we'd seen the swim area, seen the swim exit. We knew where transition was. We knew where our bike was going to be. And all that stuff's kind of feeling, familiar and comfortable. But neither of us had seen the bike course at that point. So after we dropped off our stuff, we just did one loop, but we rode the course. And we're, you see it from a car, it's different from a bicycle. And, we could tell that there was going to be a couple, maybe 3 or 4 hills that we're going to have to really work at. But that was our perspective from a car. We enjoyed reading the signs that somebody put up on Grandma's Hill as we drove the course and felt better about it. And that was good. And then by that time, it was probably like 6:30, 7 p.m. on Saturday night. So we ended up going back to the hotel and just parking. I think we ended up getting dinner at a barbecue place nearby after that. Yeah.
So you go to bed the night before the race, and then you didn't stay watching Kona or anything like that. You just kind of go to bed.
Well, yeah, we tried to go to bed early. We were staying on the 10th floor of the Seelbach, and as anyone's familiar with that hotel, that's all right. They also have a ballroom, and we were like right around the corner from the elevators. And Big Brothers, Big Sisters of Louisville were having a big gala event, so they were making noise until about 10 o'clock that night. So we tried to go to bed early. Succeeded to a certain extent, but once their event was done, I definitely slept like a baby.
Good. Now, whenever you get up on race day, you wake up and you get everything ready. What does this look like for you before you head down?
So I laid out my gear. We woke up about 4:45 and kind of started getting moving in that direction. So I put on, for my swim, we knew it was going to be wetsuit legal, at that point. So I had, carried the wetsuit and I wore what I would plan to put on after the race, which was, I had my tri-suit on, tri-bottoms on underneath, and then, just jeans and a long sleeve shirt and, a jacket, and a hat. And so we walked from the hotel to the start line, with our, I had a special needs bag, and I used that's right, I did. I used the IRONMAN Louisville backpack that they gave us with to hold all my stuff in it, because I had just a couple of things for bike special needs in case I needed it, which I did. Thankfully, I had it. So and then we dropped that off and then walked to the swim start, just wearing our regular clothes. And I'm glad we did, because it was still cold. It was so cold. But I was at least not in just a wetsuit or no shoes. Like, I don't know what that would have done to me mentally to stand there especially once we got delayed, to stand there that long,
Right. Now, whenever you're in transition, you're putting your wheels right at 100 PSI, and
that's right.
You don't really have any other real goals, but you're just using nutrition like goos, bananas, and Gatorades with your base salt to fuel yourself along. You're aiming for about 400 calories an hour on the bike ride here. Did this shift from what it normally would be to what it would be on race day because of the temperature was going to be cooler? Did you shift that
Yes.
up a little bit?
I think so. Yeah. I normally had planned for much more. I usually, like when I did Steelhead, which was, I don't remember exactly, but it was in the 70s. It was warm. It was hot, for Michigan standards. I would pick doing Steelhead so that I could have the experience of swimming in a wetsuit before doing it. I'd only done one before that in a wetsuit. So, I did Super Frog in 2014. And that was a great race, but it was in the Pacific, in a lot of different conditions. So, so for Steelhead, my bike nutrition, I had basically planned to drink a bottle of water and a bottle of Gatorade between every stop and use salts as needed. For this, and then I also had 4 gels that I had taped to my bike, and then, I'd grab a couple if I needed it or whatever. But, I at least had those 4 if I needed it. I did not need to drink a bottle of water and a bottle of Gatorade between stops in these conditions. I did not even need to drink a full bottle of Gatorade. In fact, for the first time in the history of my triathlon experience, I did not get water or Gatorade at one of the stops because I still had like a full thing in between my speed bar and then, a bottle of Gatorade, down in the triangle. So, yeah.
So after you get everything done in transition, it's raining at this point, and it's about a mile or so down to the swim start. Is that right?
That's right.
Close to a mile. So you head down there, get everything kind of mentally set up in your mind of how bad of a day this is going to be from a weather standpoint. But mentally, how are you preparing yourself for what's to come? Because this is not the perfect 72 degrees sunshiny day, low winds that everybody wants. This is a 48-degree, raining, cold day that nobody wants to race in.
Mm-mm. No, at that point I was focused on the swim, and did not think too much about the rest. Like I knew that was going to be challenging. I was worried about exactly how much current there was going to be, not knowing, of course, what was going to happen. But, it was my friend and I was like, let's line up, in like the 1:30 range. He's like, well, I want to line up in the 1:45, hour 45. That way we don't have to get passed by a lot of people. So I was like, okay, that's fine. So we lined up there, and so we're sitting and, we're standing in the field, kind of towards the end, of the line, intentionally. So I was fine with that at the time. It was no problems with that. We still had 16 and a half hours no matter when we start. No big deal, right? In theory, exactly. It didn't end up being that way. And I'm glad the race went the way it did for me, but I know that was, in retrospect, something that I probably would like to have changed, that we lined up in an earlier heat, so we didn't start at 8:35, 8:40. But 9:30. I didn't start till 9:30 in the morning. It was, I guess if I was, if I could recall exactly what was going through my mind at that point, it was like how angry I was at the weather. This is stupid. Why am I out here? And then blaming Thomas for it.
Yes, always. Blame Thomas.
Yeah. Exactly.
Man,
exactly.
So you realize that they delayed the swim start by 30 minutes here to make it
so we were
o'clock. What was this like?
We were, I don't know, probably 50, 60 people from the sidewalk. So we could hear that somebody had a bullhorn. And he kind of, Thomas, looked at me and he walked off. And I was like, we had made friends with the people near us and we're chit-chatting and about the race and how many races they had done and, all that kind of fun stuff. And, he came back and he was like, the swim's been shortened and we're not starting until 8. This is probably at 7:10, 7:15. And my first reaction was like, sweet, it's shorter. And then followed closely by, oh no, I wanted to swim it, but why? And, the details were not, clear, but it was something to do with the current. It was about all we didn't know what the current was. We didn't know why or what had happened. But that they were, delaying the start till 8.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So once you actually get up there to get in the water, finally, what was this? Like
An hour and a half later.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
it took a while.
yeah. Oh, yeah, it took forever. And so because we had lined up in the last line of any really appreciable numbers and stayed in it, they ended up taking a lot of people a long time to get through the line. And then because there was not 2.4 miles for people to spread out in, people were getting jumbled up. So they ended up slowing down the entry. They only had one pier to jump into the water. And so it just took forever to get there. And then, so we stayed dressed until we saw, the bag drop for your clothes and stuff. So that was fine. That was definitely a good plan because we stayed as warm as we could for as long as we could. And definitely needed to. Although I did feel that nice, that feeling of soft concrete, as we were walking down the dock, which was the sensation of your bottom of your feet going numb. So it feels like your feet are squishy, or as part of the concrete. So that was an interesting feeling.
Wow. So after you get in the water and you realize that it's only going to be a 0.9 mile swim, and you're in and out of the water in less than 19 minutes.
That's right.
Like,
yeah.
You're in and out quick. And
yeah.
You're in T1. How does that swim go for you? I know there's one rogue buoy out there. And
yeah.
That's been
I guess they started out with all the buoys and they had washed away by the time we got there. And there was, basically we were following a path of kayakers who had positioned themselves in the current, and saying, go left, go right. And, they told us, go around this one part of the bridge and just go straight until you see the exit and then go that way. And we had heard, that was something I definitely remember from, the athlete brief was, if you line Joe's Crab Shack up with the PNC building, that's going to be your sight line for whenever you're once you make the turn at the buoy. So as soon as I saw that, I could see both. I was like, all right, I'm going to head that way, which wasn't exactly the way if I had done that, I would have been blown past the swim exits. I needed to actually bear further in just because the current was going so strong. I think it was like 1.1 knots and normal is half a knot to a knot of current. So yeah, it was chaos. But it was fun to like roll over on my back and underneath the bridge and watch how fast I was going underneath it with no effort whatsoever. It was wild.
Man. So you get done with the swim and you get to T1. You're in T1 for nearly as long as you were in the water. So
yeah, it was cold. It was warm.
Yes. So how does T1 go for you?
T1 was fine. It was very, I suspected it would be when they told us they were slowing us down that it was crowded. Like there wasn't very many empty seats. I finally found one, and then got on into my my cycle bibs and jersey and put on the vest and the leg arm warmers and the nice dry socks. Tried to dry my feet off as best I could, and then was ready. I was not rushing by any stretch. I was being very deliberate and like making sure I had all the stuff and, having all my bike stuff in a bag. I couldn't put things in pockets, or I didn't put things in pockets. So I was grabbing a couple of gels that I had stashed and, I ate just a nutrition, not a Nutrigrain bar, but I just ate a bar for fuel and felt good. I felt real good at that point. I was ready to go out there. And as soon as I got out, it wasn't as bad as I thought because I was dressed appropriately at that point. So, I was able to go. As soon as I walked outside, just went straight to my bike, grabbed it and started going.
Man. So with T1 here, you're really trying to warm up, get on somewhat dry clothes, and mentally prepare for this 112 miles of riding in the rain for yourself.
Yeah, I didn't mention this part. I forgot to mention this earlier. There was a training ride I did in late September, where it was Scotia weather. And there's anyone who's familiar with DC knows there's Haynes Point is a great place to just, get a bunch of miles and time in. So I'd left my house in Arlington and gone down to that and was just doing loops. And, saw this storm that looked like it was forming over, Reagan National Airport, but it was over there across the river. It was fine. It wasn't doing anything. So I did another loop, which takes about 20 minutes, whatever. And came back around to that same side of the point, saw it again. It looked a little bigger, a little closer. And I was like, that's fine. I'll get wet. No big deal. Well, long story short, I got stuck in a thunderstorm on Haynes Point, like 5-6 miles from my house. And there was nothing I could do about it. And I was going to get wet, and I was going to get scared from all the thunder and lightning. And it was, ended up hiding under a bridge for a while, from 395 when it comes across. And then by the time I got home, it had stopped raining. So I had all this to say, like, I felt the experience of riding in the rain, and I wasn't terribly stressed about it. It was the cold weather that I wanted to make sure that all my toes and fingers and face and, the rest of me stayed warm enough to not be negatively impacted.
Right. So what were you actually going to wear for this bike ride? I know you said you had a few plans, but what did you end up actually wearing?
So I had full finger length gloves. I had arm warmers. They were sleeves, but they had a layer of insulation under them, and they're waterproof. And then I had just a regular bike jersey and a bike jersey vest. So the neck was longer. So when you put it around you, it sealed up from your neck and under your arms, and it went all the way down. And then I just had regular bike shorts on. And then I was planning on using these for the run, but, those sleeves that go over your calves for compression. I ended up using those on the bike ride just as another layer against the wind and rain. It was definitely good to have that. So that's what I ended up wearing.
Okay. So as you get out on the bike ride for the first few miles of the bike ride, how is the bike ride going, and what do you notice about the bike ride first off?
So you're down on River Road to start with, and for whatever reason, while the transition area was packed, I guess I started out towards the back because there was only probably 50 people behind me when I jumped in the water. It wasn't very crowded at that point, so it was kind of nice and relaxing. And my goal was to keep my heart rate in zone 2 for as long as I possibly could, or no matter what was going on. So about 140 beats a minute for me was 142 was the max. So I'm trying to maintain a 16 mile an hour pace. That was my goal for River Road and up to the start of the loop, and see how that felt. And, I bike to work as often as I can. And, biking is my happy place. If there was a discipline of triathlon that I liked the most, swimming is a close second, but biking is definitely number one. So
with the zones here, I have this part of my plan basically to help you figure out your zones with a calculator.
Yes.
And that's what you use. Is that right?
That's 100% right. Yeah. And then I have a Garmin watch that I was using, and I had it programmed to show so basically instead of looking at the time, so I didn't really care that much. I had it, there's a screen you can look at where it shows your zones you're in. And I just made sure I stayed in that green zone 2 band. And then, obviously when the hills were coming, I didn't look at it too much, but I try and, stay between a 15, 60 mile an hour pace as when I was able to. If I was climbing, obviously a little slower. When I'm going downhill, I'm going a lot faster.
Right. So whenever you think of your strategy for the bike ride, what did you want to hit from a speed perspective, a heart rate perspective, cadence? What does this look like for you?
So yeah, 70 to 80 per RPMs for cadence. I didn't really train you looking at watts, although now I'm more, I look back, it would have been nice to know what that is or was when I was training so I could emulate it more easily. But I knew heart rate, I knew cadence, and I knew between the two of those things, if I watch those, I wouldn't overexert myself and just burn out before getting to the run. So those were my goals really for that part. Then I kind of broke it up into segments. I didn't look at the entire 112 mile bike ride. I'd never gone that far before, this race. So, in fact, I don't think I had done more than a metric century. Anyway, so I think my longest bike ride was like 70 miles. So this was, I knew I needed to break it up into, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time, right? So,
yep.
I needed the River Road segment. I needed to get up the hill to the start of the loop. and you get past Grandma's Hill to the special needs stop. You get through town, then you just start, get back to 42, then you just start it all over again. And just, I knew the next thing, and in the middle there was that U-turn. That was also another like kind of checkpoint mentally for me. So, there was so much to think about with the number of people on the loop, and the hills and people braking, going downhill and all the way over to the left, that it was hard to really think about, just wanted to stay upright on two wheels. And I saw a lot of people. I saw somebody, a car hit somebody.
What?
I saw somebody. Yeah, it was crazy. I was right in the wrong place at the wrong, I was in the right place at the wrong time, so I didn't get hit. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time. But there was this it turned out to be a guy that was lost on a road he shouldn't have been on, and he basically stopped and turned. He passed a bunch of bikers, stopped to turn left, and then as they were trying to go around him, turned, and this poor guy got stuck, and he just ran right back into the back quarter panel of this truck. So he turns into a driveway. I met this, I'm wearing a Coast Guard kit. And this guy is talking to me. He's a Navy submariner type guy, real nice. And we're just chatting as we're going. We both see it happen. We stop, and I think it was a gold SUV of some variety, pulls into the driveway of the car, and he like backs up real quickly, and like so me and him stop. This guy's like wailing in pain, like laying in the middle of the road, and so like it appears that he's trying to leave without stopping. So a bunch of us blocked the driveway. Whether he was or not, I don't know. He did end up stopping and getting out of the car, and was like, "Oh man, I didn't see you. I'm so sorry. I'm trying to find a soccer thing for his kid who's sitting in the front seat. Shouldn't have been." I think the kid was like 9 years old, or looked to be, similar age to my kids. And the guy had, I don't know what kind of bike it was. It was gray. It looked really nice. It was definitely carbon fiber. He definitely had carbon fiber rims. He probably was on his second loop. When that happened. I don't know what happened to that race. I don't know his number. I hope he's okay. I hope he finished his day. I don't know how bad his bike was though.
Gosh, that sucks.
Yeah. So, and then there was somebody like on one of the smaller roads. There was somebody in a neck brace in the ditch, like just laying there. I don't know what happened. I guess they lost control going down the hill, but that was another ambulance like parked, and people were going slow through there. Of course. That made a lot of sense. But
no,
there's also a
doesn't really make much sense, honestly. But
well, no, that because there was a EMS guy like trying to get her out of the ditch. Like they were like, "Hey guys, watch out where you're coming through." What doesn't make sense, and I agree with you on, is where you're going down the hill and there was people parked in the left and just not there, blocking. They were blocking the entire lane. I had to yell at one person. I was like, "Move, coming left, whatever," because I didn't want to cross a double yellow line. But there was a curve at the bottom. Like I didn't know if there was a car coming or not. So, that was that one, the second loop, none of that happened. There was nobody really seeking that. I saw a lot of flat tires, but those were the two big things. And I also didn't have as many because it started to thin out, whether people were quitting or were moving on to the second lap and they didn't need to be out there anymore, or past their second lap. And my second lap, it was a lot easier to navigate down those hills. And I'm not a small person. I ended up, getting a lot of momentum going down the hill and going real slowly. So I played up the hills and I played leapfrog with a couple people, but eventually, because I was keeping that consistent speed or trying to keep that consistent speed, I guess, ended up eventually past the people that I was playing leapfrog with for most of it.
So whenever you actually got towards the second loop, how did you experience the road quality? The aid stations, did they have enough what you needed? And mentally, were you feeling okay?
Yeah. So I mentioned earlier there's one of the first big hills you have to climb up is Grandma's Hill, and there's some funny signs, but one of the as you go up it, that somebody put out, and it said, one of the last ones says, "Only the lucky ones get to do Grandma twice." And so that was a mental checkpoint for me. Like when I drove it the other day or the night before and saw that, I was like, yeah, I'm going to be lucky if I get here, I know I'm going to be able to finish the bike. And the second time through, right after Grandma's Hill, I stopped at the special needs bike station, and I had a base salt, that had fallen. And so I didn't have any salt. Thankfully it was cold and I didn't really need as much salt on the bike, but, I ended up getting that out of my bag and carrying on with my day. And you know, my second loop was when I really noticed my toes. I didn't really think about them too much until I realized I couldn't feel them. And then so I started to try and move them intentionally. And it hurt. And I knew that was good because I could feel that pain. There's nothing bad going on.
You still have the feeling there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's a bad pain, but it's still feeling. So that's good. I don't know if that makes any sense or not, but.
Oh, it does. I understand.
Yeah. So I knew they were, when I was at the special needs, they're like, oh, why don't you go into the school and warm up? I was like, if I get off this bike, I'm not getting back on it. Like, I'm going to keep going.
Yeah,
thank you though. Yeah, exactly. I know what's going to happen here. Like,
man. So whenever you actually get to the later portion of the bike ride, miles 70, 80, 90, not only are you in uncharted territory of where you've never been in training, but you're also in a mental ground of where you've never been as well, because you've never went this far, this cold, right after a swim, regardless of how long the swim is.
Sure.
Now then, mentally, you're having to battle this weather temperature as well. What was this like?
It was weird. I actually, because it was not as crowded as the first loop, it was still rainy and it was still in the, 50s or something, right? It had not warmed up appreciably. I felt better. Like I saw that 80-mile tick, and then like that at that time, I think if I'm remembering correctly, I need to get to 42. And once I got on 42, I was taking 42 all the way back down. So I just had to get to Highway 42, even though you're on it for, 20 some odd miles, or getting down to River Road and all that. I actually was in a pretty good place mentally. I felt confident in my biking. I felt like I was keeping a good speed. And that my toes did not change. Like I could still feel that bad, that hurt. So it was good. And I was angry at the weather, but no, that kind of that provided some energy, I guess.
You're angry at the weather? What do you mean angry?
There's some choice words said about rain and cold weather in general. And yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is a family program. I can't repeat those words, right?
I don't know if this is a family program or not. I mean, I've had some interesting people.
Yeah, I was just like, F this. I was like, fuck this weather. This is stupid. Why are you doing this? It's like, Thomas, is all your fault. and things like that. Like, I can't believe I'm here out here right now. Like, why am I doing this to myself? Just so
man. So after you get to mile 100, you only have 12 miles left of the bike ride. How are you holding up mentally?
But before you get there, I get to mile 100, but at that point I had already finished the loop. I was on the, I turned right on that lollipop instead of going back down where I came up. There's a couple of hills, but nothing really appreciable to worry about. And so I felt like as soon as I got done with the second loop and made that right turn, I was in a great spot. I was just like, yeah, like you're going to get done. Like now it's not all downhill, but it's all downhill from here. So, I hit mile 100 with probably the same confidence I did or a higher confidence than I did at 90. And then, through 105 and 110, and they had just paved that area. It was really, really smooth. It felt great.
Wow. So whenever you actually get ready to get off the bike, the last 2 and 3 miles, are you doing anything to start preparing to get off the bike? I know if I'm thinking of the right plan that you bought from me, I mentioned the transitional cool down and how you need to find that. Did you find that?
Yeah, I did not. I did that. Yeah, the transitional cool down. Like I did it when I was training, leaving a bike path to get back to my house, which was about 2 miles, and it was kind of hilly. So I definitely would, during training, take my time getting back to the house to switch to running. For this race, I kind of pictured myself once I got past, I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was like a power plant or this big building that was on as you're returning to Louisville on your right. That was probably about 3 to 5 miles range from Louisville, from the transition area, that I would spend, I would try to cool down, lower my heart rate, keep the cadence, but not exert myself, just keep it going. And there were a lot of people doing that. So I started passing people, which I was not trying to do. But it just ended up happening that way.
Right. So whenever you got to T2, you get off the bike, hand off your bike to a volunteer there. You're in T2 for...
Maybe you. Who knows?
Yeah, there were quite a few of us there. And you're in T2 for 25 minutes. And I would attribute this to trying to warm up before you get ready to get on the bike or get on the run.
That's right. And because it was rainy and wet, I had some chafing issues I needed to deal with. And that I wasn't sure I was going to be able to leave that tent. And so once I took off my wet kit and put on my tri-suit for the run, I felt better, but I wasn't sure I could run. There was a gentleman who had this big tube of chamois butter, like the purple stuff. And I had my own stuff, to use, but it just wasn't as good as it could have felt. And so I asked him if I could have some. Tried something new on race day. They said not to do it, but I think honestly that handful of chamois butter that I used was crucial in getting out there on the run and feeling good. First time I didn't realize that my time in T1 was that long. Honestly, it felt like I was not intentionally staying to warm up, but in T2, I definitely took my time because I was cold and I needed to I wanted to get feeling back in my feet before I started doing anything. And in fact, I walked out and walked right back in. I was like, nope, too cold. Let's hear this.
So as you're getting ready to head out onto the run, I know that there's actually heaters in this transition tent. Normally there's fans and there's misters and water and all that. And I feel like here they should have just said, hey, here's some hot cocoa. Warm up. Because so many people, I was there volunteering, and many people that I know did this race. And of the people that I know, even some of the pros here just did not finish because it was too cold. And if you weren't prepared for the cold the right way, you were going to suffer catastrophically. You're not going to get through this on an easy day at all. So
you're right.
Going into the run after you leave the tent the last time, mentally, where were you at to get to a happy place on the run? Because you're not out there breaking any land speed records on this, and you know that you're going to be out there more than 5 hours, and maybe more than 5 and a half going into it. And mentally, that's a long time to be out there in the cold. How are you? In the rain. How are you mentally approaching this run? Because that's hard to do. This episode is sponsored by Wasatch Apparel. Wasatch Apparel was founded on the belief that everyone should have the ability to have custom quality apparel without the stress of dealing with large clothing companies. The vision of Wasatch Apparel is to provide the highest quality apparel for endurance and fitness enthusiasts. They specialize in custom triathlon and cycling gear. Whether you're an individual that wants to make an impression or a large team that needs kits for everyone, Wasatch Apparel has the highest quality and customer service to deliver exactly what you need. Thank you, Wasatch Apparel, for sponsoring this episode. How are you in the rain? How are you mentally approaching this run? Because that's hard to do. Yeah.
I'm pretty stubborn and determined. I think anyone who attempts these types of race has to be to a certain extent. Like you have to have that intestinal fortitude, that determination, that drive, that internal drive that self motivates you to keep going when others would say, "No, this is dumb. I'm not doing this anymore." And it was dumb. But it was a dumb in retrospect. I enjoyed the experience of it, and I knew. So my thought at the time was, you've come this far. You've gotten to the swim. You've gotten through the bike ride, more you could do, and now you're at a marathon. You've done 2 of those. I raced Marine Race in my preparation to do this race. So you just keep going. When my friend Thomas, he's prior Army, and we were talking about he's a fantastic runner. So I was like, I'm the most worried about the run. And in one of these the things he said, and when we first started talking about, was airborne shuffle. I was like, what are you talking about? What does that mean? He was like, well, you just keep moving your feet, keep that forward progress, keep that forward momentum going, and you'll get through 26 miles eventually. May not be any, like you said, not breaking any land speed records, but you'll get it done.
Right.
That was kind of my start, was like, all right, just keep your feet moving, get through that first mile, get through that second mile. Now, all right, hey, there's a turn coming up. We're going to go that. What can I see far on the right? I know that, just looking at the map, that the turnaround's at around 6.5, 7, around 7 miles, whatever it is. I just get that. And I had to get to that turnaround twice. So, and then I like doing math in my head to keep my brain occupied. So I was like, all right, 6 miles, broken down 4. So I've been having, and I was like, okay, so if I get to this point, I'm a fourth of the way there. And so I would, do it. I would figure out the fraction at the distance I was at. Mind occupied, just keep it moving. And then I like on autopilot,
Wow. So as far as your strategy for the run, did you want to tackle this with a run-walk strategy? Did you want to do this with a certain nutrition plan? Because at this point of the day,
sure,
you're nearing around 4:30, 5 o'clock in the day, and you know that by the time you get to finish, it's going to be near 11 o'clock or even 10:30, somewhere in there.
Oh, no. I got out of there. I guess if I finished, it took me 6 hours to do the run, which I think is what I had, 6 and 10. And I finished at 12:15 at night, almost exactly. And I started around 6 p.m. It was already getting, the sunset was getting real close. And so that first mile was, there's people, and it was nicer because it was still bright out. And there was a lot of music, and people were more, so it was a lot easier to do that first 5, 10K, than it was the second 10K for sure. Cause then night fell, and it was cold and rainy, and nobody wanted to be out there. So, I know Louisville has a reputation for having a great run course because you run through all these neighborhoods where people live. But once you get out of downtown, at least on October 14th, 2018, there wasn't really a whole lot of people out.
No.
A couple.
And I think that has a lot to do with the rain that was there too. I mean, I've heard about the guy that was on the bike with the boom box. I don't know if you saw him or not.
Saw him several times. He was great. Yeah, he was awesome.
Yeah,
love that guy.
I don't know what kind of system he has, but he has like a tripod bicycle or a 3-wheel bicycle, whatever, with a boom box set up on it that is so loud.
Oh.
And he was just going back and forth on the run course.
I think calling it a boom box is a discredit. Like, it was like front level speakers that were hanging off the sides of his bike and with lights, and he was covered in plastic, so it didn't, the thing was legit. Like, and the fact that he kept going back and forth, and he probably logged 40, 50 miles on the bike, doing that. Like, he wasn't going fast, but he was going faster than us. And so I saw him a handful of times, and always liked seeing him. That's for sure.
Man. So as you approach miles 10, 11, and 12, you're getting towards the halfway mark. How are you holding up physically? Do you have any cramps, GI issues, any mental bad spots at this point? What is this like? Sure.
Yeah. So, getting past, I think it's right where, you do the turnaround around mile 7, and then around mile 9, like I used the bathroom for the first time, right around where they had that base salt tent near Churchill Downs. And I had brought a long sleeve shirt, to wear over my gear in case I was for the cold weather. I did not end up needing it. So I ended up just throwing it in a trash can around then. But, for me, and that time, because we started late, because, I think I ended up like a 15 mile an hour pace on the bike, and going about a 15 minute mile pace on the run. I was worried about finishing on time, just being able to finish, like get to that's what I thought was still a 16.5 hour cutoff. So, I'm keeping my slow and steady pace, like walking through the aid stations and running the rest of the time. I was fortunate. I did not have any cramping issues until about mile 25. And, so, for that point, for all that, everything else, I was good. I just needed to figure out how much time I had. And like I said before, I like figuring out the math in my head. So I was like, all right, well, I can do, if I have this much time, I need to maintain at least a 50, basically I determined as long as I maintain a 15 mile an hour minute pace or better, I should be able to finish within the cutoff. By the time I got to, so mile 13, you turn around right at the entrance chute to the finish line. I get it. I'm not sure how I feel about it now. At the time, I hated it. Cause it was like, oh, you got to keep going. I think and I know that's intentional, but for me, I would have liked to have turned around maybe a little bit before the final shoot. It was, I guess, good to see, and I get it now, but at the time I didn't like it at all. And that's right where they had the run special needs.
And that's like a cruel joke at the very end.
It is. And I ran right past my hotel too. Like I was, so I didn't mention this at all, but so Thomas, my buddy, is a much faster runner than I am. Like I knew, and I was trying to figure out like how far ahead of the bike I was on him. If I was 30 minutes an hour, whatever, because he jumped in the water right after me, like how much time it would take him to catch up to me. So I figured around mile 12, 13, I should start seeing Thomas. So I was looking for him too. In theory, yes. So, and I didn't see him. So that was like, what's going on? And then I asked one of the run special needs volunteers how long I had. It was like right at 9 o'clock at that point. And she's like, I think it's still midnight. I'm like, midnight? I can't finish 13 miles in 3 hours. I'm not to this pace. Like I got angry. And I was like, this is bullshit. And no one really knew. Like I'd ask every volunteer I could find. I asked other runners as they were either passing me or I was passing them. And they're like, I don't know. Like, we have the full 16 hours. Like, okay, fine. Let's, keep going. Met this, older gentleman and, a woman that were, had basically run walking. And they said they had figured out that they could do 16-minute paces or something. And they were going to be able to finish on time. And that's what they were doing. And I was like, all right, that's good for you. You do you. I'm going to keep going. I did my mom to do 14, 50 mile an hour pace. But after that volunteer told me I only had till midnight, I was like, well, I can't. I mean, I can finish at 12:30, which was the original cutoff. And I knew she was wrong, but it still pissed me off. So by the time I got to the turnaround at mile, 20 or 12, 19 or 20, they confirmed that you had until 12:45. And I'm still tracking for a 12:15 finish. I knew I could finish by 12:20 when I started that last half of the marathon. By the time I got to then, I knew I could finish by 12:15. And my goal was to beat 12:15 at that point. So that was my goal the entire time. And as I look back at my splits, I was very consistent on the bike and I was very consistent on the run. And I'm very happy about that. That means I was working my plan. My plan was working. And that was due in large part to knowing what my heart rate needed to be. I also had it on that 142 and I'd switch back and forth to see what my pace was. And it was a mile, eating that elephant one bite at a time, approach. And then finding that sweet spot of, I'd like to be running a 13 mile an hour pace, but I could comfortably do a 14 mile an hour pace and not overexert myself. So right. I promised myself that if I was able to do that by the time I got to mile 25, I would walk the last mile. And I did. It was cold. It was depressing. There was nobody out there. And by the time I got there at, 11:30 or midnight, like I could start seeing, you go into this Red Bull arch and like, oh, almost forgot to mention there was a volunteer right around this little, turning point near, University of Louisville where you go underneath the railroad tracks. And as you're coming up, as you're heading out, he's at the top of the hill and he's just shouting words of encouragement. And it wasn't like, hey, you're doing great. Good job. Keep going. But he was like, all you have to do right now is get up this hill. That's your one job. Don't think about anything else. Just get up this hill. And it was like, yes, that's exactly what I have to do right now. And for whatever reason, and I know based on seeing Facebook posts afterward on the Ironman group, it was perfect for so many people to hear him doing that. He got my, I didn't even have to think about it. He got my volunteer wristband thing on the first time I saw him. And I said, I hope to see you when I'm coming back a second time. And he's like, I'll be there. And like, I'm getting a little emotional thinking about like how happy I felt when I saw him coming back by that liquor store and like making that turn to go down the hill under railroad tracks and by University of Louisville. Like it was really cool that guy stayed out there. It was really cool that so many volunteers, like that guy with the tripod bike and the speakers, were out there just there, knowing that we're all like in a dark place. Yeah, just helping the day happen. Yeah, it was great. Yeah. So yeah, once I got through all that, I'm on the short stretch now. It's only 6 more miles to go. Yeah, let's do this. So got to mile 25, walked that last mile, and got to the finish line in one piece. Never saw Thomas.
So as you're actually getting closer and closer to the finish line, what are you thinking about? Because you have to have a reason of why you're doing this in the first place. Because Ironman is not for the average athlete. It's not for someone that just says, I'm just going to do Ironman. There has to be an underlying reason of, I need to do this because X, Y, and Z, and this means a lot to me. And this is going to mean a lot to me to do this and it has to be a very deep and personal reason. What is your reason to even be out there for this?
It didn't start this way. But I like I said at the beginning of the podcast, it had always been a goal to do one. And it was a personal goal. It was a selfish goal that I wanted to, one, keep active and healthy and know that I could do something like this. And it's not, that was definitely a goal of mine to do it, all along. But, this past June, one of my best friends growing up passed away. He and I and Thomas were real good friends, and, he had some health issues. I don't want to get into why he died. It wasn't good. But it was a stark reminder that, there by the grace of God go I, and a few wrong turns, few wrong choices, few more bad habits. I'm not in any different position than Casey. And, so I guess I was running for Casey too, to know that I, that continuing, and I want to honor his memory and all that kind of stuff. I don't know. Kind of hard to put words.
So who is Casey to you? I don't understand.
Yeah, he's my friend who passed away in June. He had some, kidney and liver failure and whatnot, but, he was a friend that Thomas and I had when we were in high school and college. We both worked at the same Boy Scout camp, and, I ended up moving to the high school I went to with Thomas and met, the worlds collided in college time frame. And then, my life went in a different direction, and Thomas's did as well with the Army, and we moved away, and our friend, stayed and, had gone some hard times, like a lot of people do and have. Both Thomas and I got married, had kids, all that, the typical things you do. And, we just lost touch. But, I guess in June we found out he had gone to the hospital suddenly and, wasn't going to make it. Fortunately, was able to see it before he passed. But, doing the race at that point, there was definitely, whenever there was times of doubt, I would think of Casey and remember, you're out here doing it. There's a lot of people who aren't even around anymore. Can't do it,
Wow. That is really deep, man.
Thanks. That's, we all have our reasons, right, for doing these. Initially I was definitely motivated to just do one and get it done. But by the time the going gets tough during training and especially some of those colder moments and darker moments on the run when it was literally dark and cold, you can't just, it's not for me, it wasn't enough to do it for myself. I needed to do it in his honor and his memory and honor him in that way.
Wow. So as you're getting down to the finish line and getting to the finish line and 4th Street Live, to paint the picture here for anybody that hasn't experienced this, there is literally 2 floors of bars. The music is blaring. You have lights. Yeah. You have spectators 4 and 5 deep. Even though
2 blocks long.
Yeah, it's completely ludicrous. I mean, they have a jumbotron up there. It's covered. It is electric, and I think that's even putting it mildly. I mean, it is amazing finish line. I mean, I don't know what Kona's like, but I mean, I would assume Kona's like this times 2. I mean, but this is just amazing finish line, and whenever you get to the point where you can hear the finish line, and then you can actually make that last turn to see the finish line in front of you, what was this finish line experience like for you?
Man, just pure, unfiltered joy and bliss. And it was an amazing feeling to know that when I came around this corner, I was going to the left this time instead of going to the right. And, I got to that, where you turn onto 4th Street, about a block before the finish line starts, and there's nobody in front of me. There's this one person just ahead of me. I kind of catch up to him. I said, "Hey, I'm going to jog the rest of this way. Is that okay? I don't want to get in front of your finish." And she's like, "Go for it." So I jogged slowly up to it, and then as people are cheering and screaming, and it's exactly like you described, except louder and brighter and just amazing. And as you're going down the chute, people are cheering and yelling, and like they're just banging on the sides of the board, so loud that you can't hear anything over it. And I know there's music playing. I know there's people cheering, and I find like high-fiving kids that are there at midnight, and like other, adults, and just, it was so cool. And so, I was all smiles, and I was like, all right, don't ugly smile. Try and have something good for the pictures. And I mean, of course, all the pictures turned out great, in one way or another. I mean, there's some that I'm like, oh man, I can't believe I have that look on my face. And then I remember that feeling by looking at that look on my face. And I'm like, yeah, that's right. That's why I did all this. This is so cool getting to this point. I mean, it was just so happy. Such a great, and you're like, I'm done. I did it. I am officially, and I barely heard them say my name and say, Andrew Greenwood, you are an Ironman, over the crowd of the people just banging on the walls and screaming and yelling. It was, I can imagine, like you said, I can imagine what Coda's like, but if it's half as good, it's going to be great.
Yeah, man. So after you finished the race, what did you do next?
I fell onto the arms of a very willing volunteer who helped me stay vertical when I finished. So she was really cool. She's a retired Air Force, something, I forget exactly. But she was really nice. And, that's my buddy Thomas was shortly thereafter. He was wearing street clothes. And, I was at the finish line, and I crossed it, put my fingers in the air and smiled and got my, as soon as I got my medal, I was like, yeah. And I was like, oh, look at that. My leg feels a little tight. Actually when I was jogging down the finish line, I could feel that like cramp coming on my left leg, and, just trying not to cramp up. And the volunteer walked through the area, and I was smiling and crying and just happy, to be there and to be in that moment. And, know that no matter what happens, I've done this. This has happened. I did it. Got my medal, and then walked a ways in a little bit, got some water, and took my picture with the official finish picture when you're standing there, and met up with my buddy. He ended up DNFing during the bike for various reasons. That hills and the weather and just a lot of things contributed. And I think he pulled himself off the course at some point on the second loop around the 70-mile range or so. So thank God he had gone and already gotten my stuff, because I don't think I could have made it back to transition and back to with my bike and whatnot.
Yeah, that's a friend right there.
Yeah, he's the man. I promised him, I said, next time when you do your next Ironman, I will Sherpa for you. Like, I promise I will be there for you to do this for you. So, yeah, it was great. Then I ended up going straight to the massage tent, got massage, and then, my body had started to cool down and tighten up. It took a little bit to get off the table with my back was a little tight. But as soon as I walked out of that tent that was heated, like the cold hit me and I couldn't regulate my temperature. I was like, no, I just started shaking, and they brought me back in, put me in a wheelchair, took me over to medical, where I just needed to warm up. Like I wasn't overly dehydrated or at any way. Like I was just cold. And then they had a problem getting my blood pressure. I'm like, well, we know you have it because you're talking to us, but right now, and I watched it go down. Like there was no blood, it was very, very slight. So, but anywho, yeah, it was, and then we walked back to the hotel at like 12:30, 12:45, and thankfully it was only a block walk.
Man. So as you get done with the race and you look back on it, how well prepared do you feel like you were for this race?
I think I was well prepared. I think that having the training plan put me in a position to succeed, to know what doing a long workout, no matter how long it was, like I knew where my zones were and where my exertion levels were, and if I pushed too hard, what would happen. If I had some left, what I could do more. There was definitely some drills that helped me find those places. They weren't just all about improving your time and speed, but it was also like figuring out where I needed to be. And that was definitely, helpful. No one can tell you you're ready for something like this when you do it for the first time. And nor do you know, that's part of the challenge, right? But I feel like in retrospect, I was ready, for the bike. I was ready for the swim, and I was as ready as I could have been I didn't run as much as I probably could have, or as fast as I probably could have on the day of, but at that point I was about survival, and getting through it and setting any land speed records.
Right.
What's funny though is, I'm beating myself up a little bit about it, but my first, Marine Corps marathon experience, I was within 5 minutes of that finish time. So like, I still did all right,
Yeah. So as you progress forward now, if we take a look at what's next for you, what do you have next on your list of races?
Looking at doing a half in North Carolina. There's a brand new one in Beaufort. I forget the name of it. I think it's like the Crystal Coast Triathlon or something like that. But it's a new. They've got a full and a half distance, and it's in a part of the world I know well, and it's flat. And in May it'll be nice weather. So I think the propensity for bad weather will dictate where I do the next race. After Louisville. I don't know. And I liked doing the long distance, the full distance Ironman. It's going to be a few years before I do another one though, because of the amount of training time I need to devote and the family obligations and stuff I have going on. It was hard. But we got through it, and I don't know when I'll do another one at this point. Halves, yeah, I'll probably do at least one half a year for the foreseeable future, because I still enjoy the sport and the training and the regime of it, of getting ready for that. Like when I did Steelhead, that was my fourth Ironman, 70.3 distance, and it was my fastest. So I've got a lot of room for improving there, and I know I can do it with that training plan.
So if we take a look at this from a logistical standpoint, how complicated was this race for you to achieve, being that you had to go from D.C. to Louisville, get a hotel, get your bike there, all this? How complicated was this for you?
It wasn't that bad. I mean, I had a dry run with Steelhead because I rode from D.C. to Benton Harbor, Michigan, right there on Lake Michigan, in August. I did that by myself as well. This time I had, my friend Thomas. Had he not gotten my crap from the transition area, it would have been a lot harder logistically, but, really it was fine. Driving, that back was a long day. I ended up stopping in Huntington, West Virginia to spend the night and then driving the rest of the way, which was about a third of the way through.
As far as what's going on for you moving forward let's just talk about what you were just talking about. You were talking about going home from Benton Harbor, Michigan?
Yeah. So, I mean, I had, when I did Steelhead, I drove by myself out to Van Harbor, Michigan, had to stop along the way. And that was logistically, challenging, but it was actually, I'm a glutton for punishment. I had just bought the Model 3, like 3 weeks previously. So I had not been driving that car very long. It was my first road trip. I'd never figured out how to do a road trip in an electric car before. So there's a lot of firsts for that logistically. So by the time Louisville came around, I was like, it's fine. I've already driven to Michigan. That's further. So, what made it different though is driving through West Virginia in October is colder and more hilly. So there's a lot more, you don't have as much of a range in an electric car in those types of situations. So I had to stop twice to charge. Whereas when I went to Michigan in the summer, I only stopped once.
Wow. So how far can you actually go with a Tesla?
That one, I got the long range battery, so I can go 310 miles on a charge, in theory. Ends up being like around 290 with, the way I drive and using air conditioning and everything else. So 285, whatever. But you don't want to, I don't know about you, but when I do a road trip, I like to drive as far as I can in one stretch at a time. But after about 2.5 hours, I need to stop and use the bathroom, get some food, something. And that's about as far as you can go. More than that. You can go like 3.5 hours without needing to charge. So I am the limiting factor. It just means I stop a little bit longer than I normally would have to charge.
So how long does it take to charge?
About, average is around 25 to 35 minutes.
That ain't bad at all.
No. In the lower end, you don't ever notice it at all. But I did hit the upper end. The longest charge I've ever had was on this trip on the way out. I had to stop in Morganton, West Virginia, I think. Maybe even Charleston. I forget which one it was, but I charged for 45 minutes. That was a long time. I was definitely sitting in the car going, all right, let's go. But
annoying, isn't it?
It was kind of annoying. But that's the first time in probably dozen road trips that it's been an issue. So that one time it was 15 minutes longer than I wanted to stay. Yeah, I'm okay with it because the car is definitely a lot of fun to drive.
Man. Or not drive, in theory.
Yeah, exactly. Have it drive for you. And I definitely made it a lot easier to do on those long trips on the highway. Having that autopilot to save less gray matter devoted to keeping your car in the lane, Yeah. It's gray matter to think about other things and be aware of other things.
Exactly. So, what races are on your bucket list, man?
I'd like to do a destination race. I want to do New Orleans because that was one of the first Ironmans I ever saw before I got into it, where I saw people traveling. I was leaving town the same time they were, and there was a bunch of people with bikes, and I was like, what are these crazy people doing? Like, why are they shipping their bicycle? So I want to be one of those crazy people, but I don't know exactly where. I'd like to do like Lake Placid. I want to do New Orleans. I want to do this one in North Carolina. I'll probably end up doing the old Beach to Battleship, now Ironman North Carolina, just because it's, in an area I know and can logistically do it easily. But I think it's going to depend. I'm going to end up being a Sherpa for Thomas wherever he goes. I've heard great things about Chattanooga. Wouldn't mind doing that half.
Yeah, I'm doing that one next year.
Nice. Now maybe I'll see you there. Florida would be cool. Yeah, Thomas was talking about doing Texas. I have no desire to do Texas.
No,
it's too hot. Yeah,
well, the 70.3s or
I'll do the 70, and that's not the full. Yeah, he wants to do the full. Like I'm good on the full right now.
Well, I just don't know about that, man. I have volunteered there for many years, and I like the volunteering aspect of it. Just I'm not so sure about the competitor doing it in me. Like I'm picky. I like a concrete transition. Like I'm picky.
Yeah. Fair enough. No, before Steelhead, I did the Super Frog, and at the time where the transition area was, it was gravelly, it was asphalt, but it was falling apart. So I'm pretty sure they've paved it by now, but it was really hard on the feet. So I get the concrete desire. I'm also okay with grass after that experience.
Yeah. Man, so we covered a lot about your race, man. Do you have anything else you want to add?
No, thanks for having me on here. It was a pleasure talking to you and kind of processing it all. I hadn't really, sat down to do this like we just did. So I'm glad to have done that.
You're welcome. So just to wrap up here, I only have 2 questions left, and that's how can people follow you?
Well, probably if you're interested in seeing anything around the DC area, exercise-wise, follow me on Strava. It's under Andy Greenwood in Arlington, Virginia. I'm sure you can find me. And then on Instagram at andy.greenwood2.
Nice.
The number 2.
So to kind of wrap up the episode here, what is your definition of a perfect race?
For me, it's attaining your personal goal, whatever it is. If you had a goal to finish under a certain time, just to finish, whatever that is. If you set a goal out for yourself and you're able to attain it, it doesn't get much better than that.
Wow.
Some people it's a PR, some people it's age group placement, getting a spot for Kona. I love that. I love that about this discipline, that you can be at varying ends of the spectrum and still be out there on the course with the same athletes. I am looking forward to the opportunity of being somewhere in the middle of my age group, kind of in the bottom third now, but I'd like to be in the top half. So that's probably my next goal, is to get better at the 70.3 distance. Trying to get my time down to below, like around 6 hours. So we'll see.
Wow.
See how it goes.
Well, Andy, I just want to thank you so much for coming on, spending some time with me today. I've enjoyed learning a lot more about you. And, thank you for actually using my plan. And I love seeing and hearing results of my plan. And I look forward to following you in the future, man.
Definitely. Hopefully our paths will cross again soon.
Awesome. Well, I'll talk to you soon, and have a good
one,
one, okay?
All right, you too. Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in today. I hope you were able to learn something from today's episode. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to leave a review on iTunes or share it with a friend. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you'd like to see pictures from this athlete's race, learn more about who I am, what I'm doing, or be on the show yourself to share your story, check out my website at CoachTerryWilson.com. Until next time, continue the pursuit.